Callie Lawson-Freeman back in action tonight. The WNBA has a whole slate of games going on tonight. And there are two teams at this point in the season, and I'm very keyed in on. One, you're always keyed in on because you cover them, and that is the Las Vegas Aces. But, some people say they're the hottest team in the league. Some people describe them as one of the hottest teams in the league. I would fall into that latter category because the Minnesota Lynx would definitely like a word. Post-Olympics is what we're talking about, who are the hottest teams in the league. But I would definitely have to say that Indiana Fever, unquestionably, are one of them. Like if the Indiana Fever had been playing the way they are playing right now, they would probably be at the top of the standings, right? And so they have some matchups coming up soon with the Aces. We're not quite there yet, but they have only lost, I believe, one game since returning from the Olympics. They've beaten teams like the Seattle Storm. They kind of own the Phoenix Mercury. I don't know why, but when those matchups happen, they seem to have the Mercury's number, at least this season. They do. They beat the Connecticut Sun. That was a close one. A potential matchup for them in the postseason, a potential first round matchup. Their only loss was to the Lynx. The other team that we're saying is the hottest team, and the team that, despite, having a recent loss that wasn't great to Dallas, I think is currently the best team in the WNBA. So a lot of that is due to this Indiana Fever backcourt of Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Mitchell. They are incredible. And I'm going to start with Kelsey Mitchell only because we're going to talk about Caitlin Clark. Of course, we know she is the engine that drives everything for the Indiana Fever. But Kelsey Mitchell, when you think about being drafted to this team, and Kelsey Mitchell, just so everyone understands, like, she was drafted number 2, the player drafted ahead of her, A'ja Wilson, right? So, like, Kelsey Mitchell has been in this league, and she's gone through the rough times with the Indiana Fever. And so to see her shining in this moment while the Indiana Fever are experiencing being above 500 for the first time in like 4 years, and just playing out of her mind. She led the league in scoring, Callie, in August, right?
Yeah.
And that's with A'ja Wilson playing the way that she is, and Nafisa Collier having the games that she did. But in the month of August, she led the league in scoring. She right now has a franchise record for the Indiana Fever with the most consecutive 20-point games. It's actually up to 7 now. And she said, forget being in the 20s. I'm going to go into the 30s in that last game. I mean, Kelsey Mitchell has just been on fire. What do you make of this, Callie?
Yeah, I mean, you said going to the 30s. She was almost in the 40s, 36 points against the Dallas Wings. So that's crazy. I mean, you mentioned the points that she's averaging. Like, the Fever are 6-1 coming out of the Olympic break. And over that span, she's looking ridiculous, like playing out of her mind, like you said. And then I think what the most notable thing of that you pointed out is, like, this is her 7th season in the league. And this is essentially her first, I mean, not essentially, this is her first playoff race. Like, so I would imagine that's got to feel really, I mean, rewarding to go through, like you said, all the struggles, all the lows with a franchise, and now finally be in a position where your performances can not that her performance didn't mean something before, but it's like, this really means something. Being in the playoffs, like, that's what you want as a competitor, as a player. And so now she's getting that, and it's definitely impressive.
Yeah. And I mean, look, her coach, Christy Sides, was talking about her. Kelsey Mitchell is a special player. Yes, she for sure is. And she was asked about her mentality, when it's clutch time. And she said, I've always been a hooper. I just like to play the game. She is for sure a hooper, Callie. She is a bucket getter, right? And she's going to be in high demand this offseason, she's let it be known that she wants to test the free agency waters. I think the Indiana Fever are not going to allow that.
I'm like, I don't think so, sister.
And they're going to
You're getting
core her.
cored.
Yes.
You are an Indiana Fever.
Yes, they're going to core her. And can you just explain really quickly like what coring means for like our listeners?
So a franchise can only use one core per free agency, and it has to be with a player that's never had that like distinguishing term. So to core a player means like this is the player. I do think though other teams are allowed to like give a qualifying offer or something like that, but then the team that cored the player has the authority to like match that so that they can keep the player. I mean, because when you core, you're giving them it's almost like a franchise tag in the NFL. You know what I mean? Like it's like this, you are core to our team. We cannot lose you in free agency is essentially what that means.
Yeah, I think there's no chances she's not there next year because I think they will exercise that core. How can you not? I mean, they are a lethal dynamic duo. Some are saying the best backcourt in the league. We can have that debate another day, but you know, they have been exceptional. You almost, it was like when they first started to playing better, it was like Caitlin and Aaliyah, and now it's like Caitlin and Kelsey. So it's been incredible. But as we noted, Caitlin Clark is always in the middle of that because I mean she is remarkable, and so Caitlin Clark has just been. There's not enough words to praise how amazing and astounding she has been in the second half of. I don't want to call it the second half of the season, but post Olympics, you know? So I just, Caitlin Clark is driving this ship. She's driving this ship. And because of all of the assists and all the records and everything that she's setting, and I mean, she had 19 assists. That's a WNBA record. So she set that as like a record, the most assists in WNBA history, right? So these are the types of things she's doing. And, I just want to make clear, like we started by talking about Kelsey Mitchell, but Caitlin Clark is the final piece to this, right? The Indiana Fever, if you were actually watching the season last year, they were in so many games and they just couldn't figure out how to close it out. And when the season first started, you were integrating new pieces again, rookies, still young players, and then they were also still trying to figure out like how to close games and do stuff. And now what we've seen is the evolution of them putting that all together. So I understand why everybody wants to give all the praise to Clark, and she certainly deserves so much of the praise because she's the best player on the team. But it's really, this is the culmination of everything they've done. And I'm curious your thoughts on this, Callie, because it's sort of reminiscent of like the Aces and what they did and how they built through the draft and got all of these top picks. And you started to see them turn into what they are now. And I don't want to sit here and just say like, they're going to be the next team up, but it feels reminiscent of that.
Yeah, I mean, no, I agree. Like in times where the previous meetings between the Aces and Fever, I've written that in some of my stories, like they are building the same way that the Aces were architected through years of struggle and then 3 consecutive #1 overall picks in the WNBA draft. And so now you're seeing with the Fever what that can look like. You know what I mean? With the Kelsey Mitchell and Caitlin Clark, they're leading their team in scoring. It's like Mitchell, 19 points per game, Clark, 18.7. So it's like they are, like you said, a really dynamic duo. But I think what's interesting is like their full team can't be discounted. Like I know you touched on Aaliyah Boston. She's 3rd in scoring, 1st in rebounding, 9 rebounds per game, and blocks, which is important, like 1.4 blocks per game. And then it gets like they have, I don't want to, maybe not depth, but it's like they're solid. Like they have Melissa Smith scoring in double figures for the past 3 games. Lexi Hull, who we kind of know for her defense, but she's also scoring in double figures lately. So it's like they're clicking.
And the 3-point shot has been wet for Lexi Hull lately. Like she's splashing threes. Like, okay, Lexi, we see you.
Right. So it's like that's what this can look like. When you look rough for a whole bunch of seasons, but then you get those pieces that finish it out, like you said, kind of with the Aces and the Fever are looking scary. I mean, I was looking at power rankings today, and some outlets have the Fever over the Aces, like in that number 4 spot, even though obviously the Aces have the number 4 spot in the league, but power rankings, that's a different animal. And a lot of people see the Fever as having really important momentum right now heading into the postseason.
Yeah, that's cute. I don't really like buy into that. I mean, I'm just saying because like at the end of the day, like I don't, and we're going to talk about the Aces. So I think this is a really good way to transition to them. But like to me, it's not like one, there's can you catch them in the standings? So with the number of games left. And so if you think, and the Aces do have one of the hardest schedules, but if you think white t-shirt Asia is going to let her team lose enough games that they fall so that, and they also have to also surpass the Seattle Storm. So you'd have to overtake 2 teams, right? And also, even though they just beat the Seattle Storm, they lost the first 2 games to them earlier this season. So Seattle Storm owns the head-to-head tiebreaker. So I don't see a path to them really getting higher than 6, but I think they will hold on to 6 because we talked about this last week that the Mercury are sort of like just not trending in the right direction. But at the end of the day, the Mercury, if they drop a game, the Mercury's still back in there. They'll own the tiebreaker over the Mercury, but there's still no guarantee that they have the 6th spot like locked in. So I just think it's one, unlikely that they can move up that high. But secondly, then you have to look at matchups. And in the first round, they're going to see either the Minnesota Lynx or the Connecticut Sun. And I definitely don't see them beating the Lynx in a series. I asked you last week, Callie, could they potentially upset the Sun? You didn't think so. You weren't sure. It's a week later. I'm going to ask you if that's still your position.
I think with how the Fever look now, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Fever upset the Sun. So I don't know if that's an acceptable answer, but like it would not shock me if that were to happen because the Fever just look so good. And I almost wish that we were going to see the Fever against the Sun one more time in the regular season, but we're not. We will see them against the Lynx, which will be probably a really good measuring stick game. I know the last time they met up, it was like a 10-point loss, and they looked solid. But like maybe in this next one, I know they play the Sparks next, then the Lynx. And so seeing how they look in that game, I think is going to be very telling of, kind of like
they also have 2 matchups with the Aces who they have not beaten this season. Yeah. So of the top teams, that is one they have not beaten. They've beaten the Liberty. They've beaten the Storm. They've beaten the Sun. They have not beaten the Aces. And not only have they not beaten them, but they were pretty much smacked in those games. Like they weren't even, So, you have Asia right now, who, like we mentioned, and we're going to talk about, is on a mission to make sure that the Aces start handling their business. So I just think it's very hard to say that they are better than the Aces. And I think the team that they have the most potential to upset are the Sun, but I don't think that that's a given, and they would not have home court in that series either. And something about the WNBA finals, just in case people don't understand, those first 2 games would be in Connecticut. So it's 3-game series. Obviously, it's 2 out of 3, but the team with the home court advantage, it's not like 1-1-1. It's you get the 2 game. The team with home court advantage is going to get the first 2 games at home, and then it switches to Indy. So yeah, could they maybe steal a game in Connecticut potentially? But that defense is stellar for the Sun, and Dejanay I think is still one of the best defenders on Caitlin Clark in this league. So I think that's a tall task. And so you mentioned last week just getting to the playoffs for them will be a great feat. And I think it will. And I think they'll go to the distance in the games with the Sun, but I probably would still right now have the Sun edging them out.
Yeah. I will say and just to clarify, I'm in no way saying that the Fever are better than the Aces or could overtake the Aces in the standings. I was just kind of pointing out what I'm seeing, but I do think that an interesting quirk for the Fever is that all of their remaining games, except for one, their last game of the season, are at home, which is such a crazy way to like end a campaign, especially with a, I mean, the home court advantage they have probably the most passionate fan base in the league. And so I think that helps them in a way. And it's funny. I know we're going to talk about the Aces. Like Becky always says, the Aces don't really have home court advantage, even though they have a very passionate fan base. They're not playing consistently well in front of their home crowd. And so I think that that's just like something interesting.
Right. So she's not saying that because the fans don't show up, but she's saying like,
right. No, that's what I just like, not because
it doesn't feel like an advantage. Right. Right.
Yeah,
and so
like they're just not playing well. And part of that is probably because they want to play so well in front of their loyal fans and their friends and family and things like that. But for the Fever, I think that's it. You can't say the same thing. It's like they definitely do have it. Like they have an advantage.
But that's why I think not having home court for 2 games to start, a playoff series on the road and to take on a team that has been a top 3 defense all year. If they pull that off, like props to them. I think if they're going to pull that off, it would have to be versus the Sun, but I still think it's more likely than not that if it was the Sun, that the Sun would still probably pull out that series. So that's what my instinct is right now. But yeah, so I'm going to put out my rankings. Just letting y'all know now, they will not be ahead of the Aces in my rankings. The Seattle Storm, I might consider putting them ahead of. So I need to dig into that a little bit. But the Aces, I will not put them ahead of.